Good morning, and thank you, Barbara, for that introduction. It's very nice to be here, and I'm glad you invited me. Today, we're going to share our views on this important topic relating to the third object of the Theosophical Society. The title that we've chosen for the talk is An Understanding of the Psychic and Spiritually Unexplained Laws and Powers of the Immortal Ego from the Theosophical perspective. The third object of Theosophy relates to the importance of the investigation of the unexplained laws of nature and the psychical powers latent in man. This object is the natural outcome of the first and second objects. When we demonstrate and live from the perspective of one life, a universal sister and brotherhood of humanity and all sentient life, beyond superficial made words, forms, qualities, hence any differences, we embrace all. When we embrace all, we feel with deep compassion. We love unconditionally. We give and behave morally and ethically. Feeling deeply, we understand first their and then our karma. We have patience with their and then perhaps our own errors. Doing so, we remain constant and committed in our efforts to observe, study, and realize a deeper understanding of all life. We make strong efforts to do this theosophically from a scientific, religious, spiritual, and philosophical perspective, with the view to know and understand all psychophysical aggregates and minds. In doing so, we try to study the heart of humanity, its cultures, and sentient lives. This outward and in degrees inward study prepares us for our third object, the investigation and study of the unexplained laws of nature and the psychical powers latent in man or humanity. There are some who feel investigation should only be contemplative and by study. Others, perhaps having partial sensitivities themselves and their own unique experiences, seek to better understand and work practically with these so-called powers. Thus, in varying degrees, we have individuals exploring a realm which is both diverse and full of superficial wonders, as well as dangers at times. With our third object, we are trying to understand all laws and powers as the natural inherent abilities of an embodied soul. This soul, our immortal ego, being on its eternal evolutionary pilgrimage or journey throughout endless cycles of life and death. It does this to consciously unfold as much as possible the omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence of its monad in the service and harmony of all. To better appreciate our theme of law and psychic abilities, we should begin with a few basics. In the world of absoluteness, there is only one true cosmic reality that perpetually sustains itself unchanged. It remains as such throughout all time, space, dimensionality, and awareness, whether during phases of active or passive being. It is this conditionless, attribute-less state which then gives rise indirectly to all else, noumenal or phenomenal. A portion of it, a reflection, so to say, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, is used to establish the universe and give rise to the essential divine root, nature of humanity. This root is an immutable and imperishable spirit of humankind, a reflection of the absolute, causeless, and unknowable all, and it lies in the heart of the immortal ego as the eternal pilgrim. This portion of pre-nature can be understood as the ground of unity itself, or as a unity, a duality, or as an inseparable threefold representation. That threefold nature is what we identify as the immortal ego. It consists of the universal Atma, the universal yet particularly individual and eternal Buddhic nature in and of all things, in conjunction with the monastic intelligible aspect of awareness, agency, and knowing. It is this threefold entity acting in concert as a progressive and eternal unity that becomes what we call the reincarnating source of all incarnating personalities. As such, there lies within each the possibility of attaining to a state of immortal self-reflective consciousness that prevails throughout eternity. A self-reflective and accessible consciousness that allows access to the full spectrum and wisdom inherent in the state of the totally awoken monad for this great cycle of manvantaric or cosmic existence. Similarly, it is this triadic or threefold entity that acts as the subjectivity underlying all space-time dimensionality, with their allowable states of consciousness, action, and being, as well as transitions of forms and phases. Being a threefold subjective entity, this immortal power is directly related to the three inner planes, wherein it, as that underlying subjectivity or observing entity, exists, so to say, prior to all observable objectivity, as we are used to experiencing it. These three planes and principles relate to the three higher or inner arupic states, conditions, and aspects referenced on page 200 of The Secret Doctrine, and are not composed of atomic elementary matter. It is only the purified ego that is able to fully and accurately attune itself to the inner workings of these states and planes. Then, with guidance and training, one learns to correctly perceive, conceptualize, understand, and gain right knowledge in accordance with karma and cycles. All the while, one is studying the laws and wisdom inherent in such states. It is therein that by attuning ourselves to these states, the higher, more eternal cities, if such can be called, may be unveiled to the soul. This is the awareness side of subjectivity, a type of Purushic representation illuminating all limited states that it stands in relationship to. In its active sense, it is as if a perceiver and agency. The key to this attunement is the reconstituted, purified ray of the spiritual ego or monastic entity. As a pure ray, it can have no contact or relation with the body, nor could it perform functions, sensory, motorically, volitionally, or even cognitively, in that pure state. It is able to do this when it first clothes itself in the highest aspect of what HPB, in a generic sense, called the astral light, and then acquiring the coverings of the lower planes with their properties, it is able to do these things and more. Dual manas, therefore, is the crucial key to all right progression in this domain. It is only manas as a conscious agency that can resonate both with the upper triadic impressions and through the astral light, those of the lower four spheres. Hence, it is able to operate as a deep subjectivity with its roots connected with the fifth through seventh planes, while its reflections focalize on each of the lower planes until the physical. With such a range of possible awareness and operation, when developed and trained, we can understand that this expansion of consciousness includes a development of the supple senses, which open up to the inner man new worlds peopled with their unique inhabitants, in no way having to look like ours, and interdependent the one with the other. The subjective becomes the objective, with a still more subtle subjectivity beyond. This subjectivity can become again even more objective, and this process continues until it focuses completely in the domain of the physical or terrestrial. Using an analogy, consciousness and its objects can be likened to the sun and its rays and forces, the latter interacting with and involved in objective manifestations and life as we understand it. The former acting as a focus for integrating awareness and knowing through the sensory and volitional rays that it radiates. Keeping this in mind, two additional points involving manas have to be appreciated in order to really get a good sense of what the psychic domain is about. One aspect of the manasic entity in its fullness is that it is the collective repository of all lives, having been lived by the monad in its manasic aspect. This might be called the universal or collective aspect of the incarnational being. The other pertains to the incarnating manasic ego of a lifetime. This latter, during a lifetime, becomes the repository for all of the impressions collected during that single life. These states of information collection, as we call them, from the two noted sources, become intimately involved in the manifestation of many extraordinary phenomena affiliated with psychic events. So keeping all of these ideas in mind as they relate to the immortal ego and its ability to rise up to the higher inner planes or descend to the lower, our next ingredient, so to say, involves the four lower planes, as reflected in the diagram of the Secret Doctrine, page 200. The first lower plane, from within without, is called the Archetypal World. The second, the intellectual or creative world. The third, the substantial or formative world. The fourth, our physical material world. These as planes and states can be seen as the first sketchy outline or model of a world, a system, a person, a life form, or anything that is coming into existence. Each subsequent descent becoming denser, more corporealized, more specialized, substantial, and then eventually gross terrestrial manifest matter. Thus, we have four sets or states of deepening subjectivity and objectivity, so to say, from without within. The higher inner planes, being spiritual, not psychic, begin with that fifth plane and state called Akasha. This fifth plane and state being particularly that of Manas. Concerning this gradual condensation and descent from above below, the doctrine teaches the presence of a universal life or motion within which all is and nothing outside of it can be. This is pure spirit. Its manifested aspect is cosmic primordial matter, coeval with, since it is itself. Semi-spiritual in comparison to the first, this vehicle of the spirit, life, is what science calls ether, which fills the boundless space, and it is in this substance, the world's stuff, that germinates all the atoms and molecules of what is called matter. However homogeneous in its eternal origin, this universal element, once that its radiations were thrown into the space of the to-be manifested universe, the centripetal and centrifugal forces of perpetual motion, of attraction and repulsion, would soon polarize its scattered particles, endowing them with peculiar properties now regarded by science as various elements distinct from each other. As a homogeneous whole, the world stuff in its primordial state is perfect. Disintegrated, it loses its property of conditionless creative power. It has to associate with its contraries. In this last quote lies all of psychic phenomena and its laws, if we could properly understand it. It is the reincarnating ray arising from the fifth plane of cosmos, the Akashic plane of the spiritual ego, that in conjunction with the organ of thought, touches and thereby can know all of nature. That's given to us from Patanjali. It will be able to quit such conjunction when it is able to achieve perfect discriminative and discerning wisdom of a 7- and 10-fold nature up to the limit of existence known as such. This kind of introduction is necessary because at the heart of all psychic phenomena, there is intelligence. And that intelligence has to do with the monastic ego. So, our next section concerns psychic phenomena itself. We have superficially looked at the incarnating being in relation to its decreasing degrees of subjectivity from within without, and the increasing grossness of the planes of its activity. Now we'll take a look at psychic events, keeping this ego in mind. Regarding psychic phenomena, at least from this writer's perspective, the so-called psychic powers are really natural abilities, coexisting with the ego as soul. It coexists with the ego and achieves acting according to their development and operating within fields of environmental organization. When abilities typically awaken on and at the different stages and planes of the soul's journey, we therefore see them as inherently natural. As such, although we use the term psychic phenomena, they are not special, they are not magical or trans-dimensional. They are simply the operation of the ego working through substance and its properties in relation to its sheaths. The latter acting according to the capacities of the forces and energies naturally coexistent with itself and in conjunction with such planes, while simultaneously learning what it is going through and experiencing, checked by karma. Typically, we are born with the brain, its 5 senses, and motor organs, having different degrees of operation and mastery. These are usually fitted to our environments. A brain for any entity, then, may simply reflect the organ in use that integrates information such that it is represented and responded to in accordance with one's environment. If we appreciate this general definition, this broadens our sense of possible intelligence and understanding concerning organisms and learning in relationship to the soul's abilities and its evolution. Since any brain mind is the instrument of soul, all life may live, learn, and evolve. Likewise, according to and modified by karmic action and law, as we awaken to these inner aspects of ourselves within certain planes of existence, so we awaken to the different abilities inherent and coexistent with the plane, mind, and substance upon which we exist. We learn, we work, and again, hopefully we evolve, checked by karma. We should always keep in mind that for humanity, the karmic forces of motive and morals runs commingled with our desires and will as they relate to this aspect of our being. This becomes very important because the very possibility of psychic abilities that broaden our ability to sense, know, and act subsequently must have their karmic repercussions. Therefore, our motives in using these abilities and the morals and ethics that guide and shape our lives become, again, very important. In this next section, we're simply going to categorize very loosely psychic powers. We could have made a simple list, but I think most have read a list of psychic abilities. And what we would like to do is put them in a different perspective so that we can begin to appreciate how they are separate yet intermingled. Our first category of psychic experiences pertains to that of the personal being. These include things such as clairvoyance, second sight at remote distances, clairaudulence, the egoic prophecy, which differs from divine prophecy, yet they are all within that psychic realm of perception. Clairsentience, or seeing that which is ordinarily not perceptible. Psychography and automatic writing, many are familiar with. Psychometry, telepathy, so-called mind reading, and trance speaking. Appearances of images to the individual. Mesmerism, hypnosis, mediumship. Somnambulism, degrees and types of synesthesias. Dreams, dreams that have been sent, warning dreams, visions, allegorical visions, voices that one hears either in sleep or while awake that have unique and distinct characteristics. Commands or even instructions. Exorcisms feel or fall within this realm as well. psychic empathy, resonance, being and taking on of the nature of another for purposes of acting through a body and communications, or merging with that body for the purposes of diagnoses in the medical domain. They actually had done experiments with this back in the 1800s. Psychic empathy, or the taking on of another's feeling state. Psychic embodiment as the ability to be in the same astrophysical space of another. The risk, perhaps, being in, similar to seances, the taking on of the physiological state of the other with its skandhas. The latter, again, could be for attempting to heal someone, attempting to diagnose their inner illness, and further, for awakening the healing instinct and related GPS that allows the psychic to locate the natural remedies required to heal the disorder that exists in nature. The reading of various levels of auras, and we make a distinction with aura and auras because per each plane, there will be fields of energy, for lack of a better word, that reflect the inner state of the vehicle at that particular plane. Formation of a myopic vehicle and the appropriate use of the myopic form concerning its operation and travel can also be seen in that psychic domain. And again, those four lower planes of cosmic existence we are using as a point of separation from the higher three or inner three to make that determination of psychic versus spiritual. Continuing the psychic abilities and experiences that may relate to the personal person. Levitation is mentioned, the extrusion of the astral limbs and their activity and how they interact with objects. Creatively generating an astral shield of sorts for protective purposes. Mantras related to nature phenomena, nature forces, and nature energies is clearly something that is uniquely individual, although many individuals try to exercise that ability. Phenomena related to mob or crowd mentality and the forces that are related to that, as well as those that are related to the crowd's behavior. All of these can be seen in the category of psychic phenomena as it impacts the individual. Our next category, somewhat smaller, would include psychic experiences related to objects. And primarily, we're looking at the dissociation or dispersion of objects, their transportation along what we might describe as geomagnetic currents to a particular destination, followed by their reintegration and resolidification. We have to recognize that whenever the teachings refer to such dispersion of objects, there has to be a limiting circumference within which they can be dispersed and yet maintained, then transitioned to a particular place such that those forces can naturally reassume themselves that are related to cohesion or attraction. There is the levitation and movement of objects, the appearance and disappearance of objects, psychometry regarding the history of objects, magnetic and electrical properties of objects, and the nature that they play in the role of general phenomena. Our third category can be seen as that related to the psychophysical or psychophysiological being. And so here we have those skandhas, we have those psychoastral aggregates. What are those astral, ethereal, and matrical elements that come together to constitute the nature of a being, for better or worse? We should consider manas in relation to the heart and the head of man in its operations concerning the body and its fields. And we know the teachings make references often to different properties that are related to the heart and the head of man in that realm of psychic phenomena. Powers of imagination have to be considered. Powers of will have to be considered as they relate to the operations within the psychophysiological field of the being. If we talk about that inner occult anatomy, the terms used today, channels, winds, and or pranas with their functions in relation to phenomena, not simply just operating normally within the body, but how they are extended or contracted to generate certain phenomena. The subcategories of winds with their particular properties, chakras, seeds, drops, essences, fields of intelligible energies, and fields of information. All of these are looked at and understood from the Theosophical occult perspective in regards to the individual and their physiological or occult anatomy. The natures of Ida, Pingala, and Shushumna, always spoken about in today's literature as currents and forces in relation to phenomena. Marma points, M-A-R-M-A, and their relation to the separation of the sheaths. Lower monastic winds, higher monastic winds. HPB makes a distinction between those in the secret doctrine. Psychophysiological body winds, or those that are operating particularly within the body. Occult chemical operations in the body, auras and the different types, their different functions, and their different viewings. Healing practices and their relation to the winds, the life kingdoms, and molecular medicinals. And in her 10 propositions on magic, HPB makes reference to these. Again, still considered to be in that psychic realm. The fourth category is a category of experiences concerning communications. Herein, we look at communications with the dead as shells of the dead, shades of the dead, the difference between the two, and elementaries. Communication with living astral individuals or forms, whether by psychics, sensitives, chelas, or adepts, and the ability to know the difference between what is there communicating with you. Very important. Communicating with the elementals through sound and light fits in that psychic domain. Engaging reflections in the astral light, correct decoding and translation of the astral waves with their impressions beyond simple visual looking in order to obtain reliable information is considered a psychic ability. Authentic communication with a devaconic monadic being, considered to be different than that of just the general run of shells and shades. Communications with an authentic planetary spirit as defined by the Mahatmas in their Mahatma letters. The ability to differentiate the states of the astral, the Kamalokic, the Avicii states, the sphere or the eighth sphere, as well as Devacon and trans-Devaconic states, still considered to be psychic in regards to the communications that one might incur in those fields. The nature of obsessions and possessions in relation to currents, the astral anatomy, body parts, as well as personas. The nature of sensitivities, influences upon sensitives, so-called inspirations, and condemned souls all form part of that world of subjective communication. Again, this latter becomes particularly important as it relates to discriminating amongst the so-called spirits or in general entities and elementals that one might encounter in their subjective journeys. Communications pertaining to telepathy, myopic appearance, thought forms, and impressions, again, can be considered in this category. The fifth category concerns that of the globe itself. Concerning the globe, there are its corresponding centers of force and energy, its so-called invisible astral currents, electrical and magnetic in nature, along with the impressions or signals that may be transmitted using them. There are the places of pilgrimage with their influences that are considered to be psychic in nature, some more sacred and purifying than others. But there are also locations associated with energies of death, dying, sickness, ritualistic sacrifice, satanic murders, if we will, those related ceremonies and the like. There is the ability to have insight into global events, acquire a sense of awareness of climate fluctuations, impending catastrophic events, looking at and relating to the elementals that are affiliated with the kingdoms of the globe and their relationship with weather, with climate, with events. There are the tendencies and trajectories of nations on that invisible plane and the movement of psychic influences, for better or worse, that can be perceived. For those that are aware of the article, The Skin of the Earth, where Mr. Judge generates a picture of that, it becomes clear what those influences can be perceived as. There are the sidereal events that we talk about from the astrological point of view, but not really recognize from the occult point of view in terms of the influences, the energies, and the angles of the earth and how this all comes together with the solar flares and the sun influences, as well as the moon. All of these have their psychic constituents and influences that impact the earth. There are the global memories and impressions within the astral field of the earth itself in regards to the earth's history. There are the early warning signs of great cyclic transitions in relations to the astral light and its energy, very similar to looking at the transitions during the solstices and the equinoxes as the year goes along. And additionally, in relationship to the earth, and we always don't think like this, there are the abilities to acknowledge when globes themselves are in obscuration, when they may be in pralaya, when they may be in the process of dying. And there are also the lokas and talas, as well as the lives associated with them that are affiliated with the globe. So again, tremendous range of psychic abilities that still do not touch that whole world of spiritual awareness or being. Our sixth category is that concerning the planes of existence. The planes are essential in understanding psychic phenomena as it relates to the ego. and as it relates to the globe and the forces terrestrial as well as inner that are constantly in motion. So in order to appreciate those planes, we have to appreciate the nature of the gunas, the tattvic motions, or those vibrations that are constantly changing, bringing about different influences, as well as the principles that relate to each of the planes. We have to be mindful of the properties of the substances themselves, their electromagnetic affinities and forces, their nature and constituents, and the relation held with the intelligible forces of the globe. Part of that relates to us and how we impact each plane in its astral nature with influences. In short, then, the powers of the spiritual being limited to that of the incarnating ego alone, i.e. the kama manasic being, are many. When the ego applying its knowledge and power to the four lower planes of existence concerning the awakening to and relative mastery of those constituents is correct, then we can say it has reached the science relating to the laws and phenomena inherent in the tattvajani state. That brings us to a right discrimination of the gunas and principles in their relations in nature. And within that is that psychic realm and its operations. The state of the Atmajani, then, as higher, pertains to the domain of the spiritual, those three inner planes that are spiritual, divine, and eternal, regardless of the typical psychic abilities that we reference. They have their own unique abilities. And so it is that which begins with the Akashic and transcends that of the psychic that we delegate to that Atmajanic state. Category 7 then would represent the completely interrelated and integrated functionality of all of these psychic abilities and powers working together as one great life, because in truth, the earth works as one life. Such then are some of the psychic abilities that can be considered natural expressions coincident with the evolutionary development of the immortal soul as an eternal pilgrim. When that ego is disciplined, guided, and trained in the sacred science of the soul, these natural abilities are unfolded in a relatively short period of time in order to help in the global service of humanity and all sentient life. The sensitives, mediums, and typical psychics are those that may express and exercise some of these abilities in varying degrees only, but not fully nor comprehensively integrated. Our third and last part concerns the idea of laws and the laws that would be involved in these phenomena. Laws in general are considered to be the right representation of knowledge concerning a predetermined set of regularly required conditions necessary to bring about certain effects consistently and reproducibly by any who apply those laws. Typically, they are independent of time or place, and hence can be relied upon as universal. We would actually be misleading everyone if we acted as if we knew or had any possible hints concerning what those laws are. They are laws that are considered to be, from the teaching side, occult conditions related to the operation of life. Even the great teachers, the custodians of the eternal truth, are bound by their vows, rules, regulations, and time-honored laws in regards to the secrecy that is required regarding such esoteric laws, and doctrine. So in a nutshell, we can simply say, we don't know those laws. Still, the teachings have been generous. They've provided us with hints, suggestions, and leading comments that point in the direction of law or laws that might be responsible to consider, that might be reasonable as being involved in phenomena. Let's quote a letter at length from the Mahatma letters. Hopefully our time is okay, but it really looks at what is behind all of this that we're exploring as psychic. We do not bow our heads in the dust before the mystery of mind, for we have solved it ages ago. Rejecting with contempt the theistic theory, we reject as much the automatum theory, teaching that states of consciousness are produced by the marshaling of the molecules of the brain. And we feel as little respect for that other hypothesis, the production of molecular motion by consciousness. Then what do we believe in? Well, we believe in the much laughed at phlogiston. See the article on what is force and what is matter in the September Theosophist. And in what some natural philosophers would call nisus, the incessant, though perfectly imperceptible to the ordinary senses, motion or efforts one body is making on another. The pulsations of inert matter, its life. The bodies of the planetary spirits are formed of that which Priestley and others called phlogiston, and for which we have another name. This essence in its highest seventh state, forming that matter of which the organisms of the highest and purest deions are composed, and in its lowest or densest form, so impalpable yet that science calls it energy and force, serving as a cover to the planetaries of the first or lowest degree. In other words, we believe in matter alone, in matter as visible nature and matter in its invisibility as the invisible, omnipresent, omnipotent Proteus with its unceasing motion, which is its life, and which nature draws from herself, since she is the great whole outside of which nothing can exist. For as Bellinger truly asserts, motion is a manner of existence that flows necessarily out of the essence of matter. That matter moves by its own peculiar energies, that its motion is due to the force which is inherent in itself, that the variety of motion and the phenomena that result proceed from the diversity of the properties, of the qualities, and of the combinations which are originally found in the primitive matter, of which nature is the assemblage, and of which your science knows less than one of our Tibetan yacht drivers of Kant's metaphysics. The existence of matter, then, is a fact. The existence of motion is another fact. Their existence and eternity or indestructibility is a third fact. From this quote, we should think in terms of motion and motions, clearly as it relates to law. When we think about any psychic phenomena that occur. HPB speaks to this point in her article, Psychic and Noetic Action, as to the nature of that motion in its various domains, including that of the psychic and perhaps that of the spiritual. It is motion following its inherent laws, its dynamics being central to the understanding of certain propositions, principles, or axioms involved in the expressions of psychic phenomena. And this motion is none other than the one life, whose laws embrace the oneness of totality, unity, compassion, harmony, equilibrium, and progression, as have been expressed in the teachings, and exist as the essence and heart of all phenomena. So if we can't figure out any other laws, we can always come back to these as being inherent within the motion that diversifies to generate all phenomena, all energy, the expression of all force, and the manifestation of all of what we are focusing on today, psychic phenomena. So what follows then are some additional ideas concerning phenomena and possibly what laws we can think of that might be involved in their manifestation. Laws of polarity may be involved in levitation, types of aversion and attractions amongst persons, places, and things. Influences may unknowably alter such polarities, generating different effects. The checking or hindering the modifications and operations of the brain, mind, and its senses may be related to what we perceive as invisibility, illusions, hypnosis, and manifestations. Transmissions and communications, remote viewings, and inner travel may relate to the laws connected with nature's natural currents, the latitude and longitude, so to speak, that can direct us from one place to another, having their own magnetic and electrical properties. This would also be the case as it relates to the pole star and the zodiacal images as related to their impact and effects at certain times throughout the journey of the zodiacal clock. The laws of occult chemistry and physiology may be involved in the relationship of the astral and physical bodies, along with their points of connection. These same laws could be involved in things such as precipitations, condensations, automatic writing, healings, heightening of sensory function, numbing of sensory function. These in turn are related to laws of concentration, perseverance, the image-making faculty, the will, the imagination as it relates to the ego. Laws of reflection we've read about in the teachings, and reversal, the astral light being one of the primary examples that is given often. These laws of reflection and reversal might also be applicable to mind's receptivity, to the clarity of the mind or the lack of clarity, to the ability to see clearly transmitted images and impressions and understand them in the way that they should be for the awakening of correct knowledge. Laws concerning vibrations, colors, and sounds may be related to the nature and operation of the lower kingdoms, the elementals in those kingdoms, the expression of our day-to-day emotions, the ability that some have to exercise influence over others. All of these can be seen as related to those laws of vibrations, colors, sounds. These same laws in conjunction with electrical and magnetic abilities may combine to generate modifications in many of the kingdoms as it relates to vegetable life or plant life, even as it relates to animal life. We can reflect on the 10 propositions of magic that HPV presented in ISIS to help us understand what some of those connections might be. Laws of affinity and repulsion will help explain the states of the ego, not only moving through the astral or the kamalokic planes, but also in its gestational and pre-devaconic state, wherein the lofty and elevated is separated out from the kamic and lower that becomes the skandhas of our nature. Recognizing laws relating to scondic affinity, association, and repulsion may help in the understanding of why egos are born in certain places, affiliated with certain families, and are drawn to certain types of life experiences. Understanding the laws related to the operations of what we might call auric or holographically photosensitive fields. In some of the comments made by the teachers, they speak about the photosphere that surrounds each individual. Some might call it an astral sphere, some might call it an aura, wherein images and information are contained. And understanding how that process occurs, what relationship they have to each other, and the nature of the impressions themselves might help in understanding aspects of memory, of elements of possession, of obsession, of the taking on of other individuals' traits, and even of what we call synesthesia. Clearly understanding the laws of moral and ethical harmony in action, resulting in the greatest karma, concerning the accomplishment of all things, will bring us to a state wherein we can truly work in accordance with nature with minimal obstructions and hindrances. The phenomena of disintegration or dispersion might be related to, again, those laws of attraction and repulsion or cohesion, as they are involved in the appearance and disappearance of things. The clear forces of centripetal and centrifugal, the attraction and repulsion, all related to the harmony and the balance of things living together or in a disruptive state. That would be the same for the phenomena that is related to harmonious interactions or bringing together of different objects or rendering them to dissipate. Laws of polarity, utilization of the Earth's electromagnetic currents in and of the space around the Earth, their interactions with the atmosphere, the state of the atmosphere are all laws related to conditions that allow for the manifestation of certain phenomena and not others. Obviously, the laws of electrical and magnetic function, the laws of motion, light, color, heat, friction, are all involved in how psychic phenomena can be manipulated, how it can be transmitted, how it can be made visible, how the materializations can occur, or again, how they can be dissipated. The laws related to occult chemistry clearly play a part, again, in relation to the 10 propositions in the kingdoms. The medicinal properties that exist there, those that obviously have a detrimental effect, can be seen, acknowledged, and understood, their patterns perceived, and the right fits generated due to an understanding of that occult chemistry and the occult properties. Laws obviously relating to the operation of the elementals are important, and laws concerning the role of thoughts and impressions, desires, fears, shapes can be tied into, again, those impressions within one's own field, or the affinities, the attractions, and the nature of repulsions that exist that allow certain things to draw near to individuals but not affect others. The currents and circulations of the body, its organs, its senses, again, turning those off, turning those on, which then brings us to all of those powers that are referred to in Patanjali Book 3, can all be explained in degrees with these basic conditions and laws in part. We would end up by saying the higher idis or cities are those of the laws pertaining to buddhi manas, not kama manas. And these are laws that exist in relationship to the eternal monad. These have a signature distinctly their own, and although not in the world of the very subtle or gross, they still stand in relationship to them and are supreme in regards to lording over them. In summing up, we can say then that since our natural spiritual development is an evolutionary unfolding, it is an awakening and a karmic path in time and according to cycles. All of this and more will be known, will be manifest and freely available someday. Yet in today's fourth round, karma-driven cycle, these abilities in their fullness are considered abnormal. For the would-be, wannabe initiate, prematurely trying to awaken such understanding and abilities in their fullness or obtain the state of that Mahatmic consciousness, perhaps this is a high-risk situation, like running a marathon in 100-degree weather. But to accomplish the fullness of the awakened monad in a relatively short period of time compared to the general cycles of humanity, just for the right to forego selfish nirvana and act as a bodhisattvic nirmanakaya for ages to come, for the benefit of humanity and all sentient life, perhaps we think it's worth the trial. We will end with the hope and wish that these words and ideas of theosophy in relation to the third object of the society will inspire some to do the impossible for the not always grateful. Thank you.